Well, there's a person, not a girl, or a birthing person with a vagina, maybe a guy, I don't care what you like, but a person with a butthole, because everyone has a butthole, off to your 90 degrees, and you want to have sex with them. You want to put your penis in their butthole. However, your feet are stuck in cement. What do you do with this boner that is trapped? You are cucked by circumstance. Well, you're going to have to twist those hips. First things first. Yes, I'm in my underwear. It is naked steak. It is not closed steak. Perhaps it should be partially naked steak. I will take this branding information under advisement. Now, getting on with the show. Pivoting is a fundamental part of boxing. If you don't know how to pivot, you are fucked. No other way to put it. So, you're going to need to learn how to do so. But if you're having trouble learning how to do this classic, right, pivot with the front foot on the ball of the foot and twisting, right, then you're going to have some real trouble. An opponent in your early amateur career could comprise a strategy entirely based around just angling clockwise and then coming and fucking you up before you can come to meet him in a way that's defensively responsible and gives you some distance backwards in this new angle, right? Of course, there is also like the front side pivot, but for this video, we're not going to be considering that because it's not used as much and it's also a little bit harder to learn. Now, I want to make sure that you guys understand, you have to understand very basics of the pivot. I want to know that you guys have done this before. This is not your very first video. This is for people that are having trouble learning it. Like it's slow, it's sluggish, it's off balance, it's kind of crappy, but not absolute no idea what the fuck you're doing. If that's the case, I will link some videos to where you can go to an abject beginner tutorial. This would be like beginner to intermediate, right? Maybe you've been boxing for 6 months to a year, something like that, and you're having trouble. Or if just specifically you're having trouble with it. So what are we going to do instead? I'm going to have to break this video into multiple parts, but we're going to showcase what the movement is in isolation, but it's not going to be done in isolation. I'm going to explain some considerations of why this doesn't work in isolation, when we're going to use this, how we're going to use this, and then I'm going to break down the mechanics of it, of how you can learn this in a modified way, like the modification in a modified way, if you're having trouble even with this. Now, all that this is instead of stepping on this front foot on the ball and twisting and going back like a regular pivot, all we're doing is twisting. This is it. Now, immediately, hopefully you guys are seeing some problems with this. Number one, if I do this, my opponent has circled out this way, and go like this, I am now in southpaw. I'm assuming that if you guys are having trouble pivoting, you're not proficient enough to be a switch hitter. This is just going to be an axiomatic truth. Now, there's a couple other problems with it. When I do my regular pivot, not only do I turn to meet my opponent at the new angle, I also gain some distance back. So I'm accomplishing multiple movements in one movement. Now, when I just twist, I do not do that. So if my opponent is only a couple steps away from me or even closer, he can just lift me up while I'm twisting, and I'm going to have some problems. The other consideration is balance. Balance because the only time that we're going to be able to do this pivot is when we're on both feet, right? A regular pivot, I can be moving around, right? And then step and come, right? I can even be bouncing around and do it. But with this, I can only do this when both feet are planted, right? Because if I only have one foot on the ground, or there's no weight on one foot, how can I twist with both? You know, it just doesn't work. So I'm only going to be able to do this when both feet have landed. Then I'm going to be able to do this. So the balance is going to be very difficult, and there's also going to be fewer times where I'm going to be able to do it if I have to do this, say, on my heels, because if, say, I'm in the middle of a step and I'm much longer than my typical stance. Now, I have really good dorsiflexion, which is the ability to push this heel down, right, this back heel. But most of you guys, if you step out far enough, your heel's going to lift up, right? So for you guys, it's going to be a problem because you want to be able to do this not on your heels, but on the balls of your feet, which probably is going to be a little bit more difficult for you. I'm sure most of you, if you're agile, able-bodied people, can come up with some kind of facsimile of twisting, right? It's a natural movement. Might not be pretty, might not be efficient, but you can probably do it. And we're going to get to how you can do it a little bit better if you're having trouble even with this. But because we have to be on the balls of our feet, right? And we have to do this, or at least I would say the ball of one foot, right? The back foot, if we're like this, we're really far out because of just mobility concerns, then we have to be able to have that balance. So, getting into how we're going to remedy this situation, right? We've created this modification in isolation, but it doesn't work without context of other movement. What we're going to need to be able to do is create some distance back where I can step, but not only step, but put myself back into orthodox. But if I do that first, right? If I do that first, my opponent is circling, right? And all I do is step back and then twist. Look at the angle I am compared to my opponent, right? All he has to do is step out a little bit and bonk, right? And he's actually at a really advantageous angle even right here. So I need to make the step first. But I can't make the step first back because, remember, they're turning this way. So if I step back, I'm perpendicular to the new angle, right? Back would actually be this way. So, with that in mind, instead of stepping back first like this, and then twisting, and then stepping back into my regular stance, as soon as I see that my opponent is angling out like this, I'm going to take a lateral step outward, my front foot leading like this. Then I'm going to do this quick shift/pivot with both feet, and then I'm going to step back again. So how do we actually learn the mechanics, the physical mechanics, the motor engram of twisting properly, right? As I've alluded to, if we're able to get out pretty fast, it doesn't have to be perfect. However, we use these mechanics in so many areas of our sport. We use them in our offense, in our defense for slipping, and even in our pivots. This mechanics being twisting with our hips and on the balls of our feet, that we don't want poor patterns to bleed into other areas of our sport, which is something I alluded to earlier. Now, there are two main ways in this case, in this context, of how to scale a drill from beginner to intermediate, advanced, and so on. One we've already done, which is adding components as we go along, right? We did this in isolation, then we realized we have to step, then do this, and then we did that where we step, twist, and then step back, right? We add components as we go along, pretty straightforward. The other one being increasing speed as we go, right? We start our drill slow, and then we go quicker and quicker until it's as fast as we need it to be. Very straightforward ways of scaling a drill. Most good drills are going to have something like this to make it easier, harder, and so on, right? So, for you to learn the mechanics, what I want you to do first is come from your stance into a squared up position, right? Both feet equal distance this way and this way. Now, there's a certain analogy that I want you to think about. And if it makes you feel uncomfortable watching a semi-naked man show you this analogy, then you're a bigot, and I hope you don't watch my videos. JK, you're going to become such a good boxer that you're going to be able to beat people up, and it's going to restore your masculinity through my skills. So, what are we imagining? Well, there's a person, not a girl, or a birthing person with a vagina, maybe a guy, I don't care what you like, but a person with a butthole, because everyone has a butthole, off to your 90 degrees, and you want to have sex with them. You want to put your penis in their butthole. However, your feet are stuck in cement. What do you do with this boner that is trapped? You are cucked by circumstance. Well, you're going to have to twist those hips, right? And as you do so, you're going to realize that your ankles, your knees, your glutes, they're very tight. So you're going to want to complete the movement just naturally by that tightness, right? So that you can fuck your human. However, there is a problem with this, right? And this can be partially aided by this step, but it'll be aided better by the next one, which is that we are going to be on our heels to do this, right? It's not going to feel natural to do this on the balls of our feet. It's very uncomfortable. When we get in our stance and we try to do this same thing, it's going to be a little bit more natural, right? So that would be step 2, is to now go in our stance and try to fuck our invisible person and then add the twist at the end. But to make this a little better and to make it more fluid, more actually how we do it in real sport, all these great things, we're going to add something that you've already done, probably 99.9% of you, if you have a good coach. If he has not had you do this, please fire him immediately. And that's skipping rope, right? Because with skipping rope, we start jumping very slow and very high, and then we go a little faster and a little lower to the ground. Then we reduce the clearance time a lot and start going much faster. Then we start adding these footworks into it that might even resemble what we're doing now. So I want you to do that, but just without any rope. And there's no real value in starting in this squared up stance. I want you to start in your stance and do it, right? Because what you're going to be doing is taking a jump as high and as slow as you need to get that twist. And then you settle and you return. And then you just reduce the clearance from the ground and increase the speed until it feels natural. And you're going to notice just automatically that once you get to a certain speed, it only feels natural if you twist with your hips first and then come with your ankles instead of just like jumping up and then in the air moving in a very like static position where everything moves like position like straight and like you're not actually twisting with your body. You're just twisting in the air in the same orientation. That makes sense, right? So hopefully this helped. This is, like I said, a band-aid solution. To actually employ this in a way that's effective, you'd have to be quite advanced to understand the strategy, very quick, and very good at southpaw to be able to quickly do this and then launch an offense or whatever, do a counterattack. I do have another video on this, similar movement to this, which I will link in the description. And that's all. So have a nice day. Have a nice week. Have a nice month. Have a nice year. Have a nice decade. If you don't live that long, well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your time for as long as you may live. Goodbye.